Welcome to yet another episode of Glimpses of a Glorious Past, an informal history of the Lawrence School, Lovedale. Unforgettable Parades, the title of our latest episode, in which we have snippets of founders' parades from 1949, 52, and 2014, each of them historical in one way or another. We begin with the Founders' Parade of 1949, recounted by one who was actually there. Group Captain Madhav Kashyap, Vishist Seva Medal, mentioned in dispatches, Indian Air Force retired, who is now in his late 80s. Group Captain Kashyap's recollections will be read out by Prem Rao, Nilgiri, 1967.
On May 14, 1949, the school was taken over by the Government of India, Ministry of Education. It was formally renamed the Lawrence School, Lovedale, Nilgiris. I was in the junior Cambridge that year and was in Hope Grant House. In those days, almost everyone had a nickname. I was given the nickname Wild Billy Hickok for my boxing skills. I had knocked out a British boy who was much bigger than me in a comb. By the way, in those days, comb was the school term for combat, when two boys settled scores by fighting it out. On September 6th that year, the King's Colours was trooped for the last time. It was later laid to rest in the large hall where it exists to the day. 72 years have gone by, but the events of that parade remain fresh in my mind. I'm probably one of the very few who are still around who took part in that historic parade. As I said, the King's Colours, presented to the school in 1921 by its royal patron, His Royal Highness the Duke of Connaught, trooped for the last time, and the flag of the Indian Union was trooped for the first time. Wing Commander Joseph Thomas, my friend, adds that India was a dominion from 15th August 1947 to 25th January 1950. King George VI continued to be the nominal head of the Indian government, and the Governor General represented him. This is why the King's Colours continued to be trooped by the school in the transition period. It was not necessary, just optional. The Indian Union flag was presented to the school in 1949, and history buffs will note it happened well before we became a republic on January 26, 1950. The chief guest for the Founders' Parade in 1949 was the Governor of Madras, His Excellency, His Highness the Maharaja of Bhavnagar. I recall presenting arms to the King's Colour, and later the colour party carried the flag out of the parade ground in slow march, while the band played the haunting tune of Auld Lang Syne. Then the Indian Union colours were laid across the dumps and consecrated by a multi-faith party made up of Swami Ojasananda of the Sri Ramakrishna Ashram, Uttakamand, the Reverend C.F. Ash, Principal of St. George's Homes, Katy, Reverend Father Kresiak, Priest of St. Anthony's Church, Lovedale, and Mir Muhammad Yaha, ex-Imam, Jama Masjid, Uttakamand. Dr. G.K. Lakhani, the Principal, handed over the flag to His Excellency, the Governor of Madras. The Maharaja of Bhavnagar then presented the flag to the school ceremoniously, and it was received by Prefect Ralph Transfield, sinking down on his right knee. As Major Nichols' command of present arms reverberated round the top flats, the swords were dipped in salute, and the slings on the old 303 rifles were smacked in unison as the boys of the Lawrence School, Lovedale, saluted the flag of the Indian Union for the very first time. Even now, as an ex-serviceman and a decorated war veteran from the Indian Air Force, I get goosebumps remembering the first time we saluted our Tiranga at Lovedale.
In our last episode, we paid tribute to Major E.J. Nichols, the military instructor at Lovedale from 1936 to 53. OL Frederick George Murphy, who was in Lovedale from 1949 to 52, asked our editors, "Is there any mention in glimpses of us carrying and laying of turf from a field behind girls' school to the field below and in front of the clock tower? I forget which year it was that we enacted the Battle of Toy Soldiers on that field. Can anyone elucidate?" By a cheerful coincidence, in this very episode, Wing Commander Joseph Thomas, Aravali, 1957, describes the Toy Soldiers Parade from the founders of 1952 in which he took part, and how Major Nichols organized the entire event.
In 1952, Sarji organized a Toy Soldiers Parade for founders. In those days, Founders was celebrated on the original date of 6th September. The parade was held on Middle Flats. There were two armies, red and blue, who fought each other. They wore similar uniforms, except that each side had coats of their own color. Each soldier carried the standard wooden rifle issued by the school armory. In addition, the Red Army had a fort with a cannon on the northern slope of Middle Flats. As toy soldiers, we had to march like toys, with no bending of the knees. That wasn't too difficult. But the catch came when a soldier was shot by the enemy. He had to fall down like a toy, stiff and straight. The ground was hard and there would have been real casualties. So Sarji decreed that Middle Flats would be turfed. We were all drafted into the turfing team. The school gardeners dug out 1 foot square pieces of turf wherever they could find it. We, the senior school boys, then carried the turf pieces to Middle Flats, where they were placed root side down on the flat ground.
Models of toy soldiers made in clay, tin, and many other materials over time have been collected by lovers of history and the military since the days of the pharaohs. Famous people, including Winston Churchill and H.G. Wells, had large collections of toy soldiers. There are pictures of them parading the toy soldiers on their lawns and carpets.
The term senior school boys may give an impression of tough, muscular young men. Yes, there were quite a few boys who met that description. But at the other end of the spectrum, there were even class 6 boys like me who were just 9 or 10 years old. 6 days a week during the games period, we marched to the digging area. Most often, this was the slope on the side of the girls' flat. The gardeners dug out the pieces of turf and we carried them to middle flats. There were no baskets or wheelbarrows, and we carried the bare pieces of turf on our heads.
Our modern day viewers would have seen the toy soldier parade in Disneyland or elsewhere in person, or increasingly these days on YouTube.
The narrative was that both sides drilled around and then fired at each other. Every now and then, an enemy soldier would be hit and would fall dead to the ground. Initially, the Blue Army was dominant, but then the Red Commander called in his artillery, the cannon at the fort. The cannon fired to a blaze of crackers, and the Blue Army got decimated. Then the priest came around and recited the last rites for the fallen soldiers, while the nurse tended to the wounded. The band played the last post. But all's well that ends well. The band played reveille, and all the fallen soldiers got resurrected. We got up, reformed into our squads, and did the final march past.
The Toy Soldiers Parade in 1952 turned out to be the swan song of Major Nichols because he passed away thereafter, as described in the last episode of Glimpses.
The Toy Soldiers Parade at Founders in 1952 was probably the only time that the school has done it. And it turned out to be Saji's swan song. Soon after this, he was diagnosed with throat cancer, and he died just before Founders 1953.
By the time of Major Nichols passing away in 1953, there were two Lawrence schools, at Sanawar and at Lovedale. The one at Mount Abu had closed down in 1950, while the one at Ghora Gali went to Pakistan during the partition in 1947. We close this episode with a memorable image of a rare event in school history. During the Founders Parade in 2014, at the vanguard of the OL marching contingent, led by President T. Gundin, were OLs from Sanawar, Lovedale and Ghora Gali. They were Prabhasharan Singh Kang from Sanawar, our own Nomita Chandi, a former president of the OLA, both from the batch of 1961, and Mohammad Asif from Ghora Gali, batch of 1963. The editors would like to record their appreciation and special thanks to the late Prabhasharan Singh Kang, a former president of the Old Sanawarian Society, for his encouragement and support during the writing of Glimpses. Sadly, he and Nomita Chandi are no longer with us. Our respectful homage to them. With this, we come to the end of yet another episode of Glimpses of a Glorious Past, an informal history of the Lawrence School Lovedale. Thank you for watching, and do subscribe to the Old Laurentian Association channel on YouTube.